Hello, I am Unica Harrell, a doctoral candidate with Baylor University. I am honored to present my research to you entitled Enigma, The Power of Resilience. It's a narrative case study on adult survivors of childhood physical abuse, sexual abuse, and poverty. In the late 1990s, Felitti and others conducted a paramount research study on adverse childhood experiences. In this study, they concluded that adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, is a leading contributor, and there's a direct correlation between ACEs and a leading cause of death in adults. Additionally, current research details maladaptations, mental illness, early death, and the dysfunction of adult survivors of childhood abuse. Moreover, the research on perspectives coming from adult survivors is limited. Most of our research details the maladaptations, and it's from, a quantitative perspective, and it only talks about the high numbers of dysfunction and the number of children that are abused. So there's limited research that details the experiences that contribute to survivors and enigmas who have gone through such trauma and came out on the other end successful and not maladaptive. So during my literature review, there was a lot of revealing information regarding adverse childhood experiences. And so the ACE study, in the ACE study, they interviewed 1,700 adult survivors. These survivors indicated that they had gone through abuse, and they detailed the types of trauma that they experienced, and they had a number of diseases, and including high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and a number of diseases. So that correlation between ACEs and poor health was really significant. Furthermore, there are studies regarding the intergenerational transmission of abuse. And so this research details how if you are an abused child, you will grow up and abuse your children, and your children will grow up and abuse their children, so forth and so on. And so the recommendation from doctors is therapy, and it is supposed to kind of foster healing and hope. And if you get therapy or participate in therapeutic practices, then you're more likely to be healed or to kind of get over the trauma that you had gone through. And so I still believe that there is a problem, because if you aren't able to afford therapy and you're not able to get back and forth to therapy multiple times a week, depending on the significance of your trauma or the amount of your trauma, there's an intersectionality of these that compounds the problem. So this led to my primary research question. And I'll share a little bit, a college experience I had. I was in a psychology class, adolescent psychology, and I listened to them detail the maladaptations of me. They told me I was less likely. Now, of course, she wasn't speaking directly to me. She had no way of knowing what I had gone through or what I survived. But they talked about how we were less likely to graduate college. We were more likely to repeat that cycle. And so I wanted to prove otherwise. So my primary research question is, what experiences do adult survivors of childhood physical abuse, sexual abuse, and poverty attribute to their perseverance? So these questions are to focus on the non-deficit points of the non-deficit aspect of what they went through. So I wasn't interested in what they went through. I didn't want them to relive that horror, but I did want to find out what made you succeed? How did you get through it? And focus on that. Additionally, there were sub-questions, because I began with a hypothesis that believed that religion played a significant part in it. So I wanted to talk to these survivors and see what role did religion play. Additionally, school connectedness. What role did your school play in helping you persevere or to develop that resilience? What roles were their teachers, administrators? And so I was interested in finding out what role schools played in helping them survive or develop resilience. And finally, the last sub-question is, what role did therapeutic interventions play? Because this is highly recommended. And so those were the sub-questions to lead to the answers that I was looking for. And so I did feel that the best way to find out why and how was to conduct a qualitative study. I conducted one-on-one interviews, and those interviews were, each participant was an individual case study. So there were 10 participants and 10 individual case studies. During data analysis, I conducted a within case analysis. So what that means is that I went through each of the stories in the transcript and tied them to the literature and the theoretical framework of the resilience theory, and to see what promotive or protective factors that they develop according to their stories. I use in vivo qualitative data analysis software, which allowed me to identify emergent themes and do a thematic analysis across all participants. And of course, validity and reliability. I conducted member checking. So once I completed the interviews and I did the within case analysis, I emailed my participants the transcript, the way I was going to present it in the research, exactly how it was going to be presented, along with the literature that it was tied to. So they had a chance to correct me, to change anything that they said before if I didn't interpret it or share it the way that they intended it to be. So the overview of findings. There were 4 themes that emerged, and some of these were a surprise for me, but the gears kind of show the significance of this emergence. So we had parental resilience. And prior to the study, I hadn't heard that before. So parental resilience, these particular participants described the adversities that they've seen their parents go through or their mother go through, surviving cancer and ultimately some, passing away for cancer, but they watched their strength gave them the hope and the belief that they could survive anything. And so they described those stories as something that helped them significantly when they were going through their trauma. Belief in a higher power. Again, another surprise. I thought that religion was going to be a huge relief and guidance. However, these particular participants describe believing in an energy or a higher power or a source, but not necessarily organized religion or Christianity. So it was more so, I believe that there is a higher power that helped me and that guided me, and that's how I prayed. And that's what I believed in. So that was a surprise as well. And not a surprise, school connectedness, because that is definitely what saved me. I wanted to be at school all day. And so these are the particular participants that believed in school connectedness, and they described how being at school saved them from being at home, being a part of extracurricular activities, and being offered leadership roles, from music to dance to Odyssey of the Mind, different clubs, that they smiled and talked about that. And it was a huge difference, made a huge difference for them. Self-determination. So self-determination, 100% of the participants used the exact words, well, not self-determination, but just determination. And they began describing how they were determined to do better than what was done to them, how they were determined not to repeat the cycle. And so each of them described wanting to be better and not imitating or reliving or recreating heinous circumstances for children. And so self-determination was huge amongst all participants. So what does this mean? What are the implications? What do we do? Have, conduct, require, and encourage. So have faculty and staff complete the adverse childhood experience survey. Conduct a professional development regarding adverse childhood experience. Everyone should know their score. You should look at those questions. And even if you have an adverse ACEs score of 1 or 0, it opens your eyes to the type of things that can happen to children. Those 10 questions in the ACE survey are significant. And it is definitely something, especially when we're in front of kids, we should be aware of. And so I think an administrator should require an elective class for mindfulness to teach our children how to self-regulate, how to de-escalate, how to help for help, how to reach out for help. And with requiring this in our schools, we don't miss any of the children. And because they're there most of the day, I definitely know that this will help, of course, based on what I learned in my research. And then definitely encourage extracurricular activities. And when your principal or your school administrator suggests that you participate in band or choir or volleyball, you kind of take that recommendation pretty seriously. Also, of course, there are implications for my fellow educators. Begin class utilizing mindfulness techniques, whether it's a 30-second breathing exercise, just something for them to de-escalate. Also, make sure you participate in professional development surrounding the importance of schools connectedness. We talk about the homeschool connection, but this research revealed that it is so much bigger and so much more important than we probably thought. And especially make sure that you complete the ACE training and take the ACE survey. Build nurturing relationships with your students, truly get to know them. And I think one of the ways I learned was to have a response journal and start the beginning of the year off with I wish my teacher knew. You'll get more information than I can assure you that you thought you would get. And also, again, encourage extracurricular activities to increase that homeschool connectedness. And so my school counselors, this is a heavy lift for you, but I do believe that in a lot of instances, we are using our counselors for things other than what they obtained their certifications for. So I do believe that the counselors should lead this social emotional learning programs at the school. So lead that, be in charge of that, and guide implementation of weekly mindfulness, whether it's something that you do on the announcements for a couple of seconds, but make sure that that way we reach all children. And because what I learned in my research is that child abuse is the pervasiveness of it is unreal. I had doctors and high SES, Caucasian. It was just a shocker to me that it was so many others, and these were people who were not labeled at risk, and therefore we would not have, as educators, we wouldn't have targeted them for additional support or giving them things or having them to see the counselor, because they were high achievers, high performers, and you would have never known the turmoil that they were dealing with at home. So let's make sure that we implement this for all children. And then hold getting to know sessions at the beginning of the year, or whenever a new student comes in, it should be required that they speak to the counselor. So that way you open up that door of that window of trust, and you use that opportunity to kind of get to know them. And that if your radar needs to be set on that particular child, then you've had a one-on-one conversation with them to get to know them. And these simple implications and recommendations can make a huge difference in a child's life. So my distribution plan. The target audience, of course, is educators and school administrators and counselors. But I believe that the best way to disseminate this information is to present it at the beginning of the year, district-wide professional development. So generally, schools get together every, from the superintendent right on down to the first-year teacher, get together, and they have professional development training at the beginning of the year. I think that is the best time to talk about ACEs and to help implement and learn about how to implement social emotional learning and mindfulness activities. And of course, a TED Talk. I've talked about this for the past 3 years, but ideas that are worth sharing. I think this will be a wonderful platform to disseminate the findings from this research, and ultimately conduct a larger scale study. There were 56 participants who 56 respondents to my survey to participate in the study. And my criteria was really specific, and you had to have gone through physical abuse, sexual abuse, and lived in poverty. But during data analysis, when I went through some of the responses, there were individuals who had just experienced physical abuse or just experienced sexual abuse. So I definitely plan to conduct a larger scale study so that we can have more significant results. And I just know that this will be one of the ways to kind of find out more and get the word out there. So child abuse is something that happens, and we don't have control over it. We're not in the homes. However, we can teach our children how to ask for help, what to do. Until we can stop and eradicate child abuse, we have got to find a way to help children become mentally healthy despite what they're going through, and to know that there's help out there. So together we all can stop this. But until we can stop it, we must make a difference and teach our children how to ask for help and how to deal with it and how to self-regulate. Thank you for your time and consideration. Have a wonderful day.